Welcome into Philthy, a Philadelphia Eagles podcast. I'm your host, Brad Wakai, alongside my co-host, Tyson Gentry. Tyson, we got a lot to talk about in this episode today. The Eagles, silent at the trade deadline. So we're going to talk about that. They did make a move for Kevin Byard. So, that was their deadline deal. But, there were some rumors that they'd be a little bit more busy at the deadline, which didn't come to fruition. Talk about the Commanders game, because it feels like every single time we play those guys, it's our kryptonite, man. Like, I don't know. It's always so strange every time they face each other. And then it's Dallas week, baby. It is Dallas week. We're going to break down the game, potentially go through some predictions, see how we're feeling, see how spicy we're feeling today. But I'm excited to get into this episode.
Me too, man. Go Birds, baby. This was a good weekend to be a Philadelphia Eagles fan. You got everything you could ever wanted. You win a close game against a division rival, and you can bitch. What else is there?
Well, and Tyson, I don't know if anybody's heard, but the Philadelphia Eagles have the best record in the NFL right now, sitting at 7-1.
That can't be true, because they're not as good as last year, and the offense looks bad, and they only had one sack against Sam Howell. There's no way they're 7-1. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, well, here we are. The Eagles sitting on top of the NFL standings. This is going to be – they're entering their tough stretch of games. We were talking off air a little bit. We're excited for it. We think the players are probably more pumped up than the fans are.
Yes.
They're chomping at the bit. All they've heard, Tyson, for the last year and a half is they don't play anybody. Now they get to show it.
And the thing is if Seattle stumbles and they beat Seattle in the middle of that stretch, let's say, and they improve to 3-0 or 4-0 on the stretch, whenever it is that they come across Seattle, and then the Seahawks will be bad. Then the Seahawks were just pretenders the whole time, and it doesn't matter if they beat the Cowboys twice in the middle of this. Then, well, yeah, but the Niners beat them worse. If they beat the Niners, it's because Purdy was concussed a month before we played. So I'm not looking for any sort of validation from anywhere else. Man, this team is physical as fuck.
Silent trade deadline, because that's what everybody's going to be talking about. Like, the Eagles were silent, and honestly, there wasn't really a lot that happened at the trade deadline, so I don't think you can fault the Eagles for staying relatively quiet. There wasn't a lot of pressure on them to make moves within their division. Now, the Niners went and got Chase Young. Okay, maybe another organization would feel desperate, like, oh, we got to go do something right now. That's not what the Eagles do. The Eagles don't panic. The Eagles have their strategy. So they stand pat on the trade deadline day today. Me personally, I would have liked to see some move. I think linebacker depth would have helped. And I think, honestly, we talked about it before, another running back, if they would have been able to get somebody for a back end of the deal, maybe a 6th or 7th rounder, that would have made us feel better. But honestly, if you're telling me this is the roster that the Eagles are going to have going forward, barring injury, I'm feeling very good.
Yeah, and we were on Get a Running Back before Kenny Gainwell hopped on Twitter or whatever at halftime. Look, you can say all these things, and I agreed. Like, it would have been nice to get another corner would have helped. Offensive line depth would have helped. Whatever it was. Like, there are people out there calling for a third wide receiver. Like, and all those things are valid. This is the NFL. They're not for sale just because you want them. That's not how this works. I don't think all we hear from everybody all the time is that Howie Roseman's on the phones more than any other general manager in the league. He's calling everybody, checking on everything. If a deal was there to be made today, that the Philadelphia Eagles thought was a good deal for them, they would have taken it, and that wasn't the case. And that's how the NFL trade deadline often works.
So, since they didn't make any moves, and people are going to be talking about the 49ers and getting Chase Young and things like that, I know a lot of people have now put the 49ers back up as the number one team in the NFL, and we talked about that pretty much at the start. We don't see it that way. Like, we still think the Eagles are better than the 49ers, even at full strength. Like, I understand they have great players. But does this do anything to deter you, like the not making moves, like deter you from believing that? Like, if there's some people that go down, do you think there's enough depth on this roster that's constructed where they can withstand some injuries?
Probably not. Like, at some of the spots, like if A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith were to go out, then all of a sudden you're a little bit nervous about the best wide receiver core in the league, right? Like, the two of them are fantastic. Just one of them kind of limits things the offense can do. If DeAndre Swift gets hurt, it's an issue. If one of the tackles goes out, it's an issue. But that's the case for every NFL team. And it's rare to have teams like the 2022 Eagles or the 2017 Eagles who are just kind of built to withstand those things. This team is not those teams, and that's okay. And so sometimes you just have to hold on tight and hope some of these guys stay healthy. I don't think there's a team in the league where you're not concerned with some of those things, right? Like if if Travis Kelce gets hurt for the Chiefs, it's a whole different thing. If we're seeing what the 49ers look like right now without Trent Williams and Deebo Samuel, and these are the top teams in the league, um, I'm not deterred at all. Like if one of them is really untimely, but at the same time, Brad, what are you going to do? You're going to go trade for a backup quarterback because Jones' knee hurts? Like you can't make those moves. You just kind of have to, run it.
Yeah, I agree. And then, Julio Jones, like everybody was like, oh, it's so awesome. And everybody's like, well, he's old. He had an impact against the Commanders. Red zone threat. That's what we thought he was going to be. Caught a touchdown pass, which was awesome. I think that's really what they're going to use him for. But I agree with you. And if one of these receivers goes out, that's where we can have a conversation. Okay, this could get a little bit scary. But I think that's the situation for every team. What happens if CeeDee Lamb goes out for the Cowboys? We're seeing what's going on with the 49ers without Deebo. I mean, if Travis Kelce goes down for the Chiefs, I mean, what are we doing there? If Jamar Chase goes out for the Bengals. So I think we can do that. Like we can always do the what ifs in terms of injuries and things like that. As it stands right now, when we came into this season, we said the Eagles have the best roster in the NFL. I don't think that's changed. I don't think that the 49ers adding an edge rusher who's been oft injured and has underperformed throughout his 5 years in the NFL, I don't think that changes that for me personally.
I mean, they're just like they're not the Avengers in the way that the 49ers are. And I think that's probably the most common team they get compared to as far as like talent wise, top to bottom. They don't have some of the names, man. They got some really good players. And some of those really good players, Brad, mostly on the defensive side of the football, did not look like very good players on Sunday. So that part was like, is this going to influence Howie Roseman in some way to figure this thing out? But at the end of the day, they get an interception to seal the game, basically.
And putting an emphasis on this before we get into the Commanders game, Giants were sellers. They sold Leonard Williams. Commanders were sellers. They sold their 2 edge rushers. The Cowboys stood pat. The Eagles were aggressive. They got Kevin Byard. So they upgraded while everybody else sold or stayed the same. So I think if you look at it in that lens, yes, the Eagles did make a move. It just happened to come before the deadline today.
And we broke that one down. So if you didn't hear that, go check out that episode.
Let's move into the Washington Commanders because it's always crazy. Like it just feels like it's so crazy every single time these guys play. And that's what happened earlier in the season when it went to overtime. The Eagles looked like they were comfortably going to win. Then things happened, and the Eagles had to scramble, and it went to OT. It was the opposite in this one. The Eagles were down early. They were down often. I mean, they were trailing by a touchdown in the fourth quarter. They were trailing at one point 14-3 in the early second quarter. And yet the Eagles answer like they always do. 31-24, go up 38-24, and then a backdoor touchdown with 49 seconds after the Eagles scored their 38th point that the Commanders go down and score. What did you think of this game overall?
It was fun. I enjoyed it. I actually thoroughly hated it while it was happening, and then when it was over, I kind of wanted every other game to feel like that. Dude, if Sam Howell played the Philadelphia Eagles every week, he'd be first-team All-Pro. If Eric Bieniemy got to coach against the Philadelphia Eagles every week, that dude would have had a head coaching job a decade ago. Like, it's just some guys have your number. I don't really know what it is. And the defense was bad, like really bad on Sunday against Washington. But I don't think that I'm going to let that override what they did to the Rams, what they did to the Dolphins, right? And two is kind of more it's all timing. So maybe that's like part of the reason they were able to break the Dolphins offense so easily there in the secondary, and they're not able to do that with the Commander. What a weird sentence that is,
right?
But I'm not putting like a ton of stock into this game from the defense. If this continues, and it truly is like worrying and could sink the season and probably will. But on the flip side, Jalen Hurts is back, brother. Like this was a masterclass performance for Jalen Hurts. This was him not quite at a ceiling. I don't think this was the best game we've seen from him, but certainly like over the last couple of weeks, it's like, oh yeah, that's the guy who was second in MVP voting. That's the guy who just signed $200 million. That's the guy this team wants to lead him to multiple Super Bowl victories. And don't get it twisted. Like that's I think ultimately what the goal is with this roster. It's we don't want one. Like we want to keep getting there. That's like we give ourselves a chance to win the Super Bowl every single season.
EPA per pass in this game, 0.72 for the Eagles. That's in the 99th percentile.
So ridiculous.
EPA per drop back, 0.62. That's in the 97th percentile. Yards per play, 6.25, 75th percentile. Just a really good offensive performance from the Eagles.
EPA when targeting A.J. Brown, 200,000.
I mean, Jalen Hurts finished with a total EPA of 24.2. Top pass catcher for the Eagles, A.J. Brown, 21.2. It's just ridiculous performance from both those guys. A.J. Brown breaks the all-time NFL record for most consecutive games with 125 yards or more receiving. Phenomenal. And then just to put a bow on this as well, from the stats perspective, this is from Sumer Sports. We talked about the Commanders' offense. This is what the EPA is saying. EPA per drop back for them, 0.09, 55th percentile. EPA per pass, 0.09, 52nd percentile. So it looks, a lot worse in the stat box and in the box score than when you actually add expected points. So when you look at that through that lens, which I think is very interesting, and I think that's why I like to look at this. And I don't think it really can tell you a whole lot overall. I think you need to combine the two, because when we were watching that game, I was like, dude, these guys can't cover. This is bad. And then for some reason, you could kind of get to these expected points, and it didn't necessarily kill them. I don't know. It's strange when combining that and those two lenses.
It felt like Jonathan Gannon was back. That's what this defense kind of felt like. They were getting cooked over the middle. Reed Blankenship was getting picked on actually quite often. There was a Jamison Crowder sighting. Like things were upside down. I'm not really like going to freak out about this. And to endure this game from the Washington Commanders, in which Terry McLaurin is the reason that like this game doesn't at least go to overtime, is so ridiculous, because that's the guy that's beaten us essentially by himself. The last handful of years that he's been a Commander, he's been awesome. What do you want to say about that secondary? Because there are moments, Brad, where it's like James Bradbury looks like maybe he's not good enough to win this team or be outside corner on the Super Bowl team, but he's playing nickel sometimes. And at certain times, Darius Slay looks like he's not good enough to be an outside corner on a Super Bowl winning team. Those things are going to we'll find out a lot more over the next 7 weeks with that secondary, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, what are you going to do? You're going to pick on Reed Blankenship because you don't want to challenge Kevin Byard. Let's be honest there, right? And so he's going to have to play better, or else what was the point in going and getting a guy like that? Besides the obvious, you add talent to that secondary. But, he's going to have to step up. And maybe at some point, Tyson, there's a little bit more of a flip to Sidney Brown back there. Reed maybe moves a little bit more in the box. I'm not sure.
I do want to point this out because I listen to a lot of Eagles content, and I haven't heard this brought up. Eli Ricks is out snapping Kelee Ringo, and it's not even freaking close. Like if we switched, like if Kelee Ringo was undrafted and Eli Ricks was a 4th round pick, we'd be freaking out right now.
Well, Eli Ricks is good, man. He's played good.
He's bouncing back too. He gets the penalty, and then a couple of plays later, he's the one breaking up the pass and stuff you love to see.
He was super talented freshman, as you know, at LSU. You're an LSU guy. You got to watch him. And then, just things didn't necessarily work out there. It goes to Alabama and wasn't necessarily considered the top-level guy coming into the NFL draft. But the frame's there, the speed's there. I think, honestly, Tyson, if he gets more comfortable and he progresses, playing him opposite of Slay on the outside and moving – Bradbury, I know he doesn't want to play in the slot, but I think at some point you're going to have to sit him down and be like, dude, you're not going to be able to just play on the outside against these top-level guys. Like, you're just not that guy anymore.
And I do think Eli Ricks playing this well, and Mekhi Garner, getting some burn in game is maybe part of the reason that they weren't so eager to go out and add. What was it? A couple of years ago, they go out and add Kerry Vincent, just hoping he can stick to the roster. Like somebody like that, throwing a 5th at a team for a slot corner. Like I think maybe the young guys are encouraging to Sean Desai and Howie Roseman, Nick Sirianni.
And Bradley Roby still in the mix as well when he comes back from injury. He played well in his first game with the Eagles in the slot role. So I think you're banking on that. Like that's another addition when he gets healthy, and you don't necessarily need him in the regular season. I mean, you want him for the stretch because you can't lose. I mean, God forbid you lose 5 games here. I mean, you're in major trouble, but I don't expect that from a roster this good. So I think a lot a lot of things you can throw out the window when you're playing the Washington Commanders, at least when the Eagles do, because it just is a weird game every single time.
It's awesome.
Let's get into it. Dallas week Tyson. This feels like a big game because when the Cowboys lost to the Cardinals and when then they got embarrassed by the 49ers, it felt like the wheels were starting to come off the train a little bit. Like it felt like something was up. They couldn't get the ball in the CD Lamb. Tony Pollard still hasn't looked right in his new starting role, but they've done enough and their defense has been good enough where they are one game back. Like if the Dallas Cowboys win on Sunday, they will be the leaders in the NFC East. So this is a huge game. I mean, just on paper, matchup wise, rivalry wise, like this is a massive, massive game. So let's break it down a little bit. What are you expecting to see from the Eagles? What are you expecting to see from the Cowboys?
Well, I think like just starting with Dallas, it was just super fixation on CeeDee Lamb on Sunday, which led to outstanding results for that offense. Like that is concerning because we just went through about the undrafted guys playing well for the Philadelphia Eagles. CeeDee Lamb is going to eat them alive. CeeDee Lamb might eat James Bradbury and Darius Slay alive. In all honesty, like he's really good. Dak Prescott's put together one of his best stretches of games here of his career over the last three weeks since they lost to San Francisco. They can't run the ball anyways. I don't think Dallas is going to come in here and decide, they're going to head to the link and just decide that this is when the running game gets going. So I think that's really what you're concerned about as an Eagles fan. I don't like Tony Pollard could bust one. Sure. Tony Pollard hasn't busted one this season. Tony Pollard typically busts one after, the defense gets worn down by a physical running back, and they just don't have that element. So if Dak Prescott's on fire, they might just be able to throw for 400 yards. That's the concerning part because Brian Robinson didn't have him going either. And a worse group of skill position players in Washington with the worst quarterback just did that to Philadelphia. So I think that's something to be concerned about for sure.
I agree with you there. I think when we're looking at it on paper and like what the matchup would be, if what's concerning me on this matchup is definitely the aerial attack from the Cowboys. Like if they're going to have time, if the pass rush can't get home and Dak Prescott can sit back there, be comfortable and pick apart the secondary that's shown some weakness this year, that's definitely concerning because EPA per pass, Tyson, the Eagles are sitting here on defensively at negative 0.02. And so not necessarily a great figure. Compare that to the Cowboys. They're negative 0.23. Overall, they're negative 0.15 EPA per play. The Cowboys are. The Eagles are only negative 0.03. So clearly on paper right now, the strength of this team on both sides is going to be the Dallas Cowboys defense when you compare the two units. The Eagles have a better offense. EPA per play, 0.09. Cowboys are 0.05. So nothing necessarily crazy there. But the Cowboys, like, back to your point, they're 0.07 EPA per pass. And so when you combine that with the fact that the Eagles secondary and what they allow through the air expected points added, it can get a little dicey. And I think that's where you can draw some concern.
But on the flip side, this Dallas defense is awesome. They fly around. They score touchdowns more than any defense in the NFL ever should. It's truly insane. Their takeaways, all that stuff. What happens when they just play somebody more physical than them? Every time. Every time. And I know like all we're going to hear this whole week is remember when the Eagles took away Micah Parsons with RPOs. They're probably going to do a little bit of that. I don't think that's like the offense they're going to run with. This is a Jalen Hurts with a bone bruise in his knee. Like, I don't think this is a guy that's giving himself up behind the line of scrimmage, protecting himself, and people are getting pissed. And then he responds by throwing from 75% completion from the pocket. Like, if that's the way the offense is going to work, that's the way the offense is going to work. Need a better game from Dallas Goedert than the one he had on Sunday. Wasn't necessarily all on Dallas, but there were some catches that you certainly would like to see him come down with. And then I think, we say it every week, man, but one of these is going to be a Devontae Smith as the number one receiver on the team week. And it kind of feels like when one guy goes for 130 every week in a touchdown, that's going to be the hyperfixation here for the Dallas defense. But Dan Quinn is a really good coordinator. He just hasn't had to play this kind of team very often. And like when they do, it hasn't gone very well. Dallas' defense is small.
And you were pointing that out to me off air, and this was from our not our buddy, but we'd like them to be our buddy, Brian Baldinger. We love his breakdowns and just how he goes through it. And so he was breaking down the line of scrimmage because that's really where this game's going to be won on both sides of the football. And for the Eagles, their success is just maul up front, play downhill, play fast. They're gonna be without Leighton Vander Esch, who's been a really good run stopper in his career. I think without him, if they can get to the second level, the Eagles, they're going to have a lot of success moving the chains and doing what they do, which is having 12-point drives. They just have to capitalize on that. That's where it becomes an issue. I think if they can't capitalize in the red zone and score touchdowns, you open yourself up to some trouble. Yeah, obviously, right? Like, oh, yeah, clearly. But I really think that's going to be the story of this game. Can the Eagles get down, and because they will, when they get into the red zone, can they capitalize and punch the ball in? If they do that with 12-minute drives and they're going to force Dak Prescott to play off schedule, I see the potential for the Eagles to blow them out. I don't see a potential for the Eagles to be blown out in this game. I see the fact. I can see the game script being the Eagles come in and
what is being
out.
blown out? What is the point cutoff that we're going to go with?
I think
2
14
touchdowns?
points. Yeah,
14
points.
What I was thinking.
Yeah, I mean, a 7 touch. If you lose by a touchdown, you lose by a touchdown, and that would obviously be frustrating if you're an Eagles fan, if you're the Eagles themselves. But I don't think that's necessarily a blowout.
I'm trying to get it in my own head of what would constitute.
Yeah, I think 14 points. I'm not sure what the official thing is, but I think for me, if I'm losing by 14 points, I'm like, dude, we got our ass kicked.
That's not good.
As far as what else you saw in like the Baldy breakdowns, anything else that you've seen leading up to it that maybe you haven't heard discussed? Is there anything else you want to share matchup wise before we kind of move forward a little bit too?
No, I think everybody knows the important ones, right? This is a huge game. This is a massive game. This is the Eagles kicking off their tough part of their schedule here, going into a bye with the chance to go up multiple games in division in the NFC, and then go into a bye here before you play the Kansas City Chiefs. So I think it's not a must-have by any means, but this thing's at home against Dallas right before a bye week, before your biggest stretch. And to be honest, against the Jets, they were caught looking ahead a little bit to Miami, and I think they were caught looking ahead a little bit against the Commanders to Dallas week, and so I don't know if you want to get into predictions right now.
I'll close with this, and we can get into some predictions here. So, just for the people who like this stuff and like ratings and things like that, if you're not familiar with DVOA, I find this a very fascinating tool, and it's just statistical analysis. Defense adjusted value over average. And so that's just basically because teams play different schedules, teams play different opponents. When you adjust for an average defense and what offenses and defenses are facing, what does that compute and what does that look like? The Eagles are ranked 9th. The Cowboys are ranked 8th in total DVOA rank. So that like on paper, this is a good matchup. Offensively, the Eagles rank 7th. The Dallas Cowboys rank 17th. Defensively, the Cowboys rank 13th. The Eagles are ranked 18th. And that's basically just what we've been discussing, right? That's like kind of what everybody knows about heading into this game. We're not sharing anything like groundbreaking, but we want to break down the points of where we think that the Eagles can find success even in their weak spot in the defense. I think if they're going to win this game, it's not eliminating CeeDee Lamb, me personally, and it's not generating pressure on Dak Prescott. I think they have to take away the middle of the field, because if they can limit Jake Ferguson, if they can limit Michael Gallup across the middle, if they can limit some of the screen plays and some of the things that Tony Pollard wants to do in space, I think CeeDee Lamb's probably going to get his, and that's fine, because Tyreek Hill got his in the Dolphins game. But I think if you can eliminate those other aspects of this Cowboys offense, I think that's where the Eagles can win their defensive matchup, where they're deficient compared to these units.
To be fair, they did hold Tyreek to like 81. Is that what it was? If CeeDee Lamb comes out of here with 81 yards and a touchdown, I'm pumped. Like I'm very encouraged with that. You're pulling up the Tyreek numbers. I see it on your
I
face.
am, yeah. So let's see here. So Tyreek Hill versus the Eagles, 11 catches, 88 with a touchdown.
88. Yeah, I think that if that's CeeDee Lamb's stat line at the end of the day, you're not very upset with that as an Eagles fan. God, man, I want this one.
Oh gosh, dude, this would be This is like almost a must win. This is like
Well,
almost a must win.
here's the thing, and so I got jumped on a little bit on the Dolphins pod that we did because I felt that the Eagles matched up really well with Miami, and it wasn't super popular at the time because that was when Miami's offense was ridiculous. It was nobody was ever going to stop these guys. The Eagles were uniquely equipped to handle that. I have a feeling this week, Brad, that Philly's going to jump on these boys.
Ooh.
Like I think that this is sometimes we just feel it. You just feel it in the air. I think this is an Eagles 2-touchdown victory.
Ooh.
I think they're going to lose in Dallas later this season. To be clear, I just think that this one is one where the Eagles are going to come out guns blazing, firing on all cylinders. I don't know how you can watch what Jalen Hurts has done over the last couple of weeks and think that this offense is still not good enough to be able to hang with top teams or beat top teams because they're just going to do it against everybody they play. And so if it doesn't look good when they're fumbling twice inside the 5 against the Commanders, that's okay. It's not, but it's okay because they could have scored 50 points, right? And so this week there will be weird turnovers. There'll be things that shouldn't happen. You're going to be stressed. You're going to be sweaty. And Sidney Brown's going to hit somebody over the middle of the field, pop a helmet off. There's going to be a mouthpiece flying. The Lynx going to lose their mind, and Philly is going to run it up on Dallas this week.
I love the confidence. I wish I could get there with you. Man, I do. So I got a 6-point victory, and here's how I see it going down. I think the Eagles.
You have it at 14, and then Dallas scores last play of the game to cut it to 6. Is that what we're going with?
This is what I have. So I have the Eagles comfortably in control of this game. I think they're going to be dominating. They're going to have their long drives. I think we're going to see some struggles in the red zone that keeps us closer than comfort, but they're still going to be up. And then during the last drive, what they're going to do, they're going to have their patented last drive of the game, have the boa constrictor wrap around, and then they're going to have a Jake Elliott field goal with like 40 seconds left. And the Cowboys, because Mike McCarthy can't manage time, he's not going to have enough timeouts. They're going to run out and not going to be able to go down and win. So I think that's how it's going to go.
But to be fair, in neither one of these scenarios do we have Hassan Reddick making a game-clinching fourth-quarter sack, which seems to be the way this team wins games. So maybe we need to recalculate.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. If anything bold you want to predict here, anything bold you like.
I think AJ is going to get his again. Like I do. I think that it
is
makes
that
a bunch
bold?
of.
Come on now.
That's what I'm saying. Like there's not a ton of like DeAndre Swift might have 75 yards and Jalen Hurts might throw for 300. Like there's no real bold take. I don't think you can come out with as far as like player props because if CeeDee Lamb goes off, that's to be expected. If Dak Prescott has a good game, that's pretty much to be expected. Maybe Jake Ferguson kills him. Like maybe Morrow and Dean and Cunningham are just really struggling to keep up with Jake Ferguson, but that's okay that Jake Ferguson is the tight end this weekend because if Dallas had if Mark Andrews played for the Cowboys, man,
oh god,
game would be far different. Like those are the types that are going to give Philly like real trouble later in the year. And I just think at this point in Jake Ferguson's career, he's probably not going to be the guy to kill you.
All right, well, so bold predictions here. I'll give you a little inspiration here because you're thinking it in a betting term because I know we both want to bet this.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Kevin Byard is going to have his first interception as a Philadelphia Eagle.
I get the game.
Kevin Byard, first pick as an Eagle, and this one he's going to make a statement at home. He's grew up, at least his family did, as an Eagles fan. He knows the importance of Dallas week. Why not have the Philly kid coming in to his hometown team against Dallas? That's when you make your presence felt as a Philadelphia Eagle. Kevin Byard, first interception.
I like that one. I don't even know if that's bold. That just gets me hyped. That'll be really fun if that happens. Yeah, and I think that in order to stay with that, I think that Philly wins the turnover battle.
Ooh.
Because if we want to be bold, that is probably the epitome of that with this football team. I really think that they're going to come out crisp, clean, and ready to roll. This is a Dallas defense that really, really wants to take advantage of bad decisions that quarterbacks make. I just think that if Jalen Hurts looks a little bit closer to the guy we've seen the last couple of weeks and looks a lot closer to the guy we saw all 2022, it's going to be tough for those turnovers to really appear. Because if Philly wins the turnover battle, this is a 2-score football game.
Oh, God, I can't wait for this game, dude. I can't wait for this game. Anything else you want to close on here before we get out?
No, I mean, Jalen Carter is going to play from what we hear, which is great news.
That is awesome news. That is awesome news. I'm pumped for this one. I think everybody else is as well. Like, even if you're not an Eagles fan, if you aren't an Eagles fan, you're probably not listening to this podcast. But if you are, you know it's Dallas week. You can't wait till it turns into Sunday, and we're gonna have a big reaction next week, win or lose. That's for sure.
And we got our what is it, halfway point of the season check-in coming next week as well.
Yep, we did our quarter poll check-in, just how we thought each position group has been doing. Like Tyson said, we will have that next week as well, plus the reaction to Dallas week as they get ready for their toughest stretch of the season. Honestly, the toughest stretch in the Jalen Hurts, Nick Sirianni era as well. So we'll learn a lot about this organization and this franchise. So stay tuned for that next week. For you NFL fans, the rest of the way, we got our breakdown coming later this week where we're giving out picks in the NFL. So stay tuned for that. We'll talk to you all next week, Eagles fans. Good luck.